Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to share with you 3 things to consider when using watercolor pencils for the first time. If you're a beginner, you can use these basic techniques to get the most out of your watercolor pencils. We're going to practice layering colors, painting dark backgrounds, and the best way to paint smooth transitions using your paintbrush to activate the watercolor. Make sure to click on the bell and comment below using hashtag Watercolor Wednesdays in the first 24 hours for a chance to get a shout out and win art supplies. Now let's jump into the tutorial. Next, I created a frame around the watercolor using artist or washi tape. This will keep your edges really clean while creating a nice frame for your dark background. So I began sketching a fish using a reference photo with lots of color. To speed things up, I began with 3/4 of the watercolor pencil drawing already completed. Next, I used a light ultramarine blue and shaded the edges around the bottom half of the fish that will be next to the dark background. Because our background is a solid color, I wanted to buffer the transition using the ultramarine blue. This way, we don't have harsh lines from the edge of the fish to the background. The blue acts as a buffer to soften the transition, providing more depth, color, and a bit of a glow to the fish. Layering colors is especially important with watercolor pencils. First thing you need to do is keep your pencils really sharp using a good pencil sharpener. This helps to keep the details as tight as possible before painting over the pencil color to activate the watercolor. One thing should be noted is that typically I can use a long-haired brush to paint very thin lines of detail. Watercolor pencils are a bit more difficult to achieve the detail, but not impossible. So my tip number 2, keeping a grayscale handy is always a good way to make sure your values are correct. What does value mean? In art, value means the lightness or darkness of color, hue. Tone is another word for value. Value in a painting defines form and creates the visual illusion of space. In this side-by-side, we can use our grayscale to determine the value of the background. In this instance, our background is a numerical value of 1. In the fish's fin, we can assign the lightest or white area a numerical value of 10. Again, these are journal studies where you test new media, try new ideas for more detailed and comprehensive work in the future. Have fun doodling, use many different mediums such as Pigma pens, watercolor pencils, brush with 2 watercolors, pen and ink, or graphite pencil. There are so many mediums to experiment, and the best way is in your journal. Because I'm using a 140-pound paper journal with a bit of texture, you have to use a lot of pressure to make sure the black pencil fills into the paper. When you're ready to paint using a small brush to smooth out the black colored background, you want to use light pressure or you'll remove color. This is when a sable brush is ideal due to its soft natural hairs. Using a synthetic brush, the bristles are much more stiff and more likely to remove color as it scrubs the surface rather than flows over the black penciled background. Experiment using different brushes to get a feel for how the watercolor will react. Different journal paper will react differently. I suggest using very light pressure and dabbing your brush on a paper towel before smoothing out the background with plain water. So I continue to paint in the details where the fins of the fish meet the black background, making sure to use light pressure. It helped to use binder clips on the edges of the journal to keep the small journal in place. This was my first time using watercolor pencils, and although I like them, I prefer using a detail brush with tube watercolor paints. I hope you keep your journal out as we experiment with many different mediums for Watercolor Wednesday. I'll see you on the next episode of Watercolor Wednesdays. If you've enjoyed this tip video and would like to see more of my full-length step-by-step tutorials, please visit my website where you can sign up to be notified when my watercolor classes will be available. Thank you for watching, liking, and subscribing.